Welcome, Eagles fans everywhere, to our continuing coverage of Eagles Training Camp 2020, presented by Independence Blue Cross. I'm Eagles insider Dave Spadaro, along with Fran Duffy at the NovaCare Complex on this warm September Wednesday morning. Fran, good morning to you.
Morning, Dave.
You know, Fran, I got to tell you this. We opened up this peek behind the curtain here, and we take a look at practice. I'm going to begin here. We are roughly, literally 76 hours away from cutting down the roster to 53 players. And I wonder, fans look and they go, my gosh, the players are practicing in shorts today. Why aren't they hitting and more contact and more vigorous practice here, trying to get down to 53 players? Or maybe the answer, Fran, is that they already know who they're going to keep and who they're going to let go.
I think a lot of those decisions were certainly made over the last couple of weeks, and certainly that's why we talked about how important Sunday's scrimmage was, right? When we were over at Lincoln Financial Field, we had our practice stream, and we talked about how important that day was going to be. Now, after coming off that scrimmage, can guys earn and lose jobs? Yeah, because there's still things that they're doing, especially in the meeting rooms and things like that. Guys can still prove that they have what it takes to make this 53-man roster. But on the field, the hay's in the barn, right? I mean, I think we're at that point.
I would think so, and I think it puts so much of a premium on every team's scouting staff. I mean, you're projecting with a lot of these players many of whom have not been in an NFL game situation. And then you're also looking around the league at the waiver wire on Saturday and Sunday to put together your practice squad. And the best personnel departments are going to be the ones who come up with those players that they can cull from those players on the street, right? And then you also have to go, all right, I've got to keep the 53 best players here. I can't make mistakes. I don't want to let somebody go who I kind of like, but doesn't fit the scheme. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Who fits the scheme of the Philadelphia Eagles and the culture?
No question. And you talk about who are those guys. Oh, you're talking bottom end of the roster. Well, you look at this Eagles team. Nate Sudfeld was that guy in 2017. Boston Scott was this guy. He was stood out in the preseason in the summer for the New Orleans Saints. The Eagles scouting department, the pro scouting side, did a great job of identifying him. The Eagles were able to bring him in. You go up and down the depth chart. Those guys are present on this Eagles team, and that's what the next few days are going to be all about.
Fletcher Cox saying, "Hello, Eagles fans. How are you today?" No hands, Fletch. Yeah, that's right. Stick to the defense, buddy. I think that the most difficult position, Jim Schwartz talked about it this morning, he felt like safety would be a very difficult position to cut. A lot of talent there. Marcus Epps and Ford, Rudy Ford, who were on the team last year, joined by some new players.
Yep.
Jalen Mills, Will Parks, Kayvon Wallace. So that's a difficult position. I think running back will be a difficult position. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Corey Clement, they're going to make the team. Keeping Elijah Holyfield? You keep him more than 4 running backs? These are questions the Eagles have to ask. And then at wide receiver, Alshon Jeffrey still on PUP. Jalen Reagor's hurt week to week. So do you go one extra there just to make sure early in the season?
Yeah, and every year, every summer, the opening training camp meeting, you see it on Hard Knocks. You see it, early in any documentary where, you get behind-the-scenes looks. The coaches, the front office, they say to all these players, your job is to make our jobs hard at the end of the summer. You want to try and go out, perform to the best of your abilities, make it difficult for us to cut you. And I said it the other day. I just feel like this has been such a very competitive camp. You look at the back end of the roster, the guys that, would be considered long shots to make this team. No one has looked out of place. They've all come in and done such a great job over the last couple of weeks.
We have continuing coverage of Eagles Training Camp 2020 presented by Independence Blue Cross here at the NovaCare Complex. And we will be live next week, one day during practice, the next time the Eagles are in pads, as they turn their full attention to the Washington football team and the regular season opener on September 13th at FedEx Field. And Fran, we've identified hot spots here throughout this training camp. The questions along the offensive line, the injuries along the defensive line. Quarterback Carson Wentz missing a couple days of practice here with a lower body injury that the Eagles do not believe is serious. Who has stepped up and claimed starting jobs? We talked, Fran, early in the season, early in training camp here. The other starting cornerback job opposite Big Play Slay, we think it's Avonte Maddox at this point.
Yep, seems that way for sure.
The nickel cornerback job, good competition. Crayvon LeBlanc, Nickel Roby-Coleman. It would appear that Nickel Roby-Coleman is kind of going to be that guy.
It would seem that way. I think you look at the safety spot, too. I think there was a lot of talk coming into the summer. Would it be Jalen Mills or would it be Will Parks? And it feels like Jalen Mills is that guy for certain coming out of camp.
Who are your linebackers? Who do you identify as, if you have three linebackers in base, is it going to, it's Duke Riley, it's TJ Edwards, it's Nathan Gary. You think, right?
I think that it seems like those are the three guys. And when they go into nickel and different sub packages, that's where you get into the different combinations. And it hasn't been one set group throughout the camp. It seems to have been a really nice rotation, competition, between all three of those guys. As all three are fighting for those two spots, all three of them kind of bring their own skill sets. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out here. We really won't find out until the team travels down to Washington.
Right, and things can absolutely change in the next 10, 11 days as we take a look at the offensive line, which, as we look at it right there, Jordan Mailata, right tackle. Jason Peters, right guard. Jason Kelsey, center. Isaac Seumalo, left guard. Matt Pryor, left tackle.
Still out there, still at left tackle. It's going to be really interesting to see, just how this goes over the next week and change, right? What are we? We're 10 days away?
Fran, I always will say this about the Philadelphia Eagles, dating back to, the early days of Andy Reid, okay? They have an answer along the offensive line. It may not be the answer that you think it is, because a lot of people are saying, why aren't you putting Jason Peters at left tackle? Doug Peterson's pretty adamant. Get used to him at right guard. But I just trust Jeff Stoutland. They're not going to, and they've got a tough test against Washington. They just can't put Carson Wentz in a risky situation, particularly on his blind side.
Yep. And they know that, and that's for fans at home is like, they obviously know what's at stake here along the offensive line. This is an organization that has always put a tremendous amount of value on that position with that group in that room. A lot of assets, a lot of resources have gone into that group. Now it's time to see some of these young guys. Can they play? It's going to be very, very fun to be able to watch that. Just on the outside looking in, I'm excited to see how it shakes out.
I think this, Fran. Fans have to understand the timeline here. Saturday, 4 o'clock. Rosters reduced to 53 players. So Doug Peterson, Howie Roseman, personnel staff, tough decisions ahead. Sunday, you get that very important practice squad put in place. And you can still add to it up to 16 players.
Most important practice squad in NFL history, you would say?
I thought last year's was pretty important, but I think in general.
In general, right?
Because you have to not only have 53 players, 16 practice squad players, and an emergency roster just in case.
Yeah. You'll have a Eagles Insider podcast, right, this weekend coming up?
Well, we will have one today that'll drop with some interviews I did yesterday, Boston Scott, and one of our camp pleasant surprises, John Hightower.
Great.
And then I'll get Howie Roseman, if all plan works, on Saturday and immediately turn that into a podcast, get his thoughts on the process to get down to 53 in these most unusual times.
Always one of my favorite interviews you do every year.
I mean, we always sit around and go, okay, who's gonna get cut? Who's gonna make it? What surprises are gonna be here? And undrafted players. Will there be any undrafted players who make it?
That's a good question. I mean, you feel like every year the Eagles always have a couple guys that make it. This year, I wonder. I mean, especially it's hurt also by the fact that there's a large rookie class. I mean, you had 10 draft picks, so it wasn't a ton of competition in terms of like, all right, well, there's a lot of draft picks that you would hope are going to make this team. Last year, there were 5 draft picks, so you double that. That's going to close the door on some undrafted opportunities.
And the O-line with all of the injuries, how do you keep depth? And what young players are going to make it there as backups? Really, really fascinating. Bring it up, guys. That's the Eagles D-line. which has been extremely impressive in this training camp period, minus Javon Hargrave and minus Derek Barnett.
It's a really deep group, really talented group, and they have been, you see these two guys here have just been a terror here this summer. I can't wait. We haven't seen these guys fully healthy playing next to each other in a game yet.
So I think they just had a little competition there, and I think Malik got the best of Fletcher, and Fletcher started blaming something else. I'm interested to see how the cornerbacks shake out here, Fran, how the entire secondary shakes out.
Yep.
I do anticipate a lot of change personnel, a lot of mixing and matching, and the big question next week, will Darius Big Play Slay match up against Washington receiver Terry McLaurin?
That will be a big topic of conversation a week from now, right? I mean, I feel like there's going to be a dozen or so articles written about it. They matched up one-on-one for a lot of the time. Last time they faced off, when the Detroit Lions took on Washington in 2019, it's going to be a fun matchup, man. And keep in mind, too, for Eagles fans, however the secondary looks and how they're utilized, how they're deployed in week one, that might not be how they're used in week two when the team takes on the LA Rams. I would not count on that looking exactly the same.
I did a podcast, the Eagles Insider podcast, with Troy Vincent a few weeks ago. By the way, a great listen just on the state of the league and the 2020 season. But we began the conversation talking about back when he played with the Eagles. Of course, he's a member of the Hall of Fame here. How did they match up against receivers? And he talked about at times, Troy would go cover the number 2 receiver, and they would mix it, or he would cover the number 1 receiver, or they would double this guy, So there's a lot of ways that you can match up where it's not simply Slay versus the number 1. Slay can take out the number 2, and you can double the number 1.
Yep. I talk with a lot of receivers, and I'll ask, would you rather face off against an elite corner one-on-one or face double coverage? To a man, they always say, I'd really rather not see double coverage. Not because they don't believe they can beat it, but because the quarterback just gets away from double coverage as fast as possible more often than not. You want to still give yourself a chance to be able to win those one-on-one matchups.
Josh Sweat and Sharif Miller. Sharif Miller gets off the ball fast. He's gotten a lot better. And Josh Sweat
Both those guys, yeah.
Josh Sweat has been at times, dare I say, dominating.
He's been really good this summer. It's been good to see. And you're hoping that Sharif continues that arc. Obviously, he was a draft pick the year after Josh, so Josh has a little bit of a heads up on him. But when you look at the way that those both guys have improved this summer, it's really good to see.
And you just saw the explosiveness of Brandon Graham, drafted in 2010, and this is a guy that brings, sets the tone, brings the energy, brings it every single day with that big smile and that bigger personality.
Here.
Boom. And Joe Osman's quick off the ball, too, and Brandon Graham just like a rocket. And there is Nickel Roby-Coleman. Sidney Jones with the catch. Sidney Jones in an interesting position, I think, Fran, as we look at the roster and the decisions the Eagles have to make in the final year of his contract. Certainly improved a lot in 2019, and then he's just been sidelined with some injuries here throughout training camp.
Yeah, and that's been the issue.
The bugaboo with him, yeah.
No question. It's just, being consistently out there on the field. When he's been out there last year, late in the year, remember, 2 big plays late in games to help secure wins for the Eagles. You hope to be able to see that. We just haven't been able to see it consistently out here.
And like we said, they are obviously in shorts and shells. And what does that mean as we're 75 hours and 45 minutes away from cutting the roster down to 53? Are there still roster spots open? And if so, how do you win a job in shorts? So
a lot of it, too.
Just something to ponder.
No question. And a lot of it, too, is the Eagles scouting staff looking around and trying to gauge other teams. Who are teams that would maybe be able to pluck a certain position? If the team is weak at defensive end or weak at running back or weak at corner or safety or receiver, hey, we feel like if we were to drop this player, these amount of teams would be able to try and scoop him up. It's a game of cat and mouse. It's really, really, and that's why I really love those conversations that you have with Howie Roseman every year on the Eagles Insider podcast. this time of year because it's just really cool to get a little bit of a peek inside that process.
Okay, Fran, so then let me ask you this. Will there be more moves, less moves, or an indistinguishable difference this weekend?
I think, I think there will probably be a little bit less.
I think less.
I think there will be a little bit less because there's no preseason tape. So you're really, especially for the rookies, you're really going to be banking on the grades that your scouting staff, your college staff had on these players coming out, along with whatever the people have been able to, because that's the other thing to keep in mind too. Pro scouts, without having tape to watch of preseason, they're scouring the internet for anything that they can find on whatever teams they're assigned to. So if you're a pro scout for the Eagles assigned to all the teams in the NFC East, you are reading, watching, and listening to everything having to do with the Washington football team, the New York Giants, and the Dallas Cowboys. And so that's the only information you have outside of the college reports. It's going to be fascinating. My guess is it's a little bit less movement than normal.
I think you play it safe as much as you can. You go with what you know.
Yep.
But we'll see. I mean, look, the Eagles have made a few additions during the course of training camp. The wide receiver Fulham.
He's been nice since he's been here.
I think he's been really good, yeah. But you have a little bit of understanding of who he is. He's been in the league.
And that's why, honestly, to me, like, since we've seen less movement in practice and, during training camp, I feel like we'll see less movement on cutdown day, right? I mean, I feel like that's just kind of like a precursor to that.
So what we're saying here, people, is make sure you're with us. And make sure if you haven't done so, please, please, please download the official Philadelphia Eagles mobile app. We are going to have breaking news for you this weekend, all weekend. So follow us on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, our official app, and our social media channels, because we're going to be rocking it. It'll be nice interception there. Good interception, Jalen Mills. That's a nice way to end it here on this Wednesday here in South Philadelphia. We're going to be back next week, the first day the Eagles are in pads, so make sure you're with us then. Thanks to everyone who's been part of this. It's been certainly much, much more than Fran Duffy and myself. But for Fran Duffy, I'm Eagles Insider Dave Spadaro. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have yourselves a great Eagles day, and fly, Eagles, fly.